lotteries and other prize shows, so I have to read the disclaimers and the instructions. And, as part of this competition, you're taking on a fictional business identity, and you're going to tell us what our role as judges is in the presentation. So please make sure that everybody knows what role has been assigned. And we'll stay in character for the first 25 to 30 minutes while you do your presentation. And we'll be looking to you to describe the legal, financial, and ethical dimensions of the problem and to recommend a solution to all three of the issues. During this time, we will not interrupt you with questions. We'll save that for after your presentation. And then you should be prepared for tough questions. Okay. We'll spend about 20 minutes with Q&A afterwards. I'll ask the first question, and then the other judges will jump in, again, in character. So they might appear tough questions because they will be tough questions. Okay. After that, we'll all take a deep breath. We'll get out of our role playing, and we'll give you some feedback. You can ask us questions. It'll be just a conversation about how it went and any guidance we might have for you. Some things to keep in mind, that it's the ethical aspects of the presentation that's most important. This is, after all, about business ethics. So describe the ethical implications in a simple, practical way, common sense. Don't use philosophical terminology. You knew that coming in. And we would expect to see that in your presentations today, so no religious or theological groundings for it that would be considered weakness in the presentation, although spiritually and morally it's fine. Similarly, any member of the team reading, not a good idea, so talk to us. But you can use notes. During the presentation, everybody is going to have a speaking part, right? Okay, I have the timer. So you have 30 minutes from now.
Okay, a quick background. As the judges, you are the executive committee of a United States Fortune 500 company, and you're preparing for a presentation to the board of directors as to whether or not our company should complete a tax inversion. Our team has been tasked with prepping you for your presentation to the board of directors, and we'll do that for you today. Currently, the United States has the highest corporate tax rate of any other country in the world. It's for this reason that over the past year, we've seen an influx of companies attempting tax inversions. A tax inversion is when a U.S. company purchases a foreign company in order to take advantage of the foreign tax base, which supposedly or will be lower than the United States tax base. Companies in the past have run the gambit of success when it comes to tax inversion. Medtronic had a successful inversion by acquiring an Ireland-based company. They saw their stock price rise. They became a stronger global company because of it. On the other end of the spectrum, we had Walgreens, who thought about doing a tax inversion, but ended up not going through because of negative publicity here in the United States. Walgreens is a good example of the ethical implications surrounding a tax inversion. And it's also an example of how it's not right for every business. Through a legal, business, and ethical analysis, though, we found that a tax inversion is the right choice for our company, Ox Innovations, and we should complete a tax inversion by acquiring Tracker Technologies, an Ireland-based company. Today's agenda, first, I'm going to give you the background of the two companies, our company's mission, and the stakeholders we took into consideration. Next, I'll walk you through a business analysis, giving you a feel for the tax landscape of both Ireland and the United States. Also some business synergies we find between ourselves and the Ireland company, and some risks from a business standpoint. Next, Jess will come up and talk about the legal analysis. She'll walk you through the legal environment of Ireland as well as the United States and EU law, as Ireland is a part of the EU. And finally, Seth will come up and give you an ethical analysis, walking you through the duties, virtues, rights, and interests, giving you a 360-degree ethical view of what a tax inversion will look like for our company. And finally, we'll end up with our final proposal and a discussion. I'd like to take a second to formally introduce our team. My name is Jake Winan. This is Jessica Chernohoy and Seth Spronk, and we represent the University of St. Thomas. Now that we have an agenda and an introduction, let's move on to the background of the companies. First, Tracker Technologies is an Ireland-based company. They're smart software developers, so they develop software for smartwatches, smartphones, and other smart devices. They have a strong European distribution chain, and they have innovation as one of their core competencies. On the other hand, our company, Ox Innovations, as you know, is a Minnesota-based Fortune 500 company. We are smart accessory hardware developers, so we develop the phones and the watches themselves. We're looking into global expansion, and we also have innovation as one of our core competencies. Through our analysis, we wanted to keep our mission and values at the forefront of our mind. As the executives, you know, the mission of our company is to foster self-improvement through smart technology. Our virtues are diversity, innovation, stewardship, and education. We want to make sure we keep these at the forefront of our mind throughout our analysis here. In addition, we want to make sure we keep all of our stakeholders in the front of our minds. We've branched out our stakeholders into 3 groups: our home country, the United States, our citizens, customers, and government, those same constituents in our global community, as well as our company constituents. Throughout our analysis, we put our feet in the shoes of each one of these stakeholders to make sure that we were seeing this tax inversion through everyone's viewpoint. All right, so let's jump into the business analysis. Since this is a tax inversion, a good place to start would be the tax landscape of Ireland and the United States. As I had mentioned, the United States has the highest corporate tax rate of any developed country at 35%. That's opposed to Ireland, who is currently at 12.5%. Now this is the statutory rate. The effective rates, or the rates that the corporations actually end up paying after deductions and credits, is a little bit closer, with the United States corporations on average paying 22% effective tax rate, while Ireland is paying around 14.4%. So you can see a definite advantage by being an Ireland-based company from a tax standpoint. In addition to this, the United States is one of only a few developed countries that has repatriation tax. What that means is that all of our current foreign earnings that are made abroad, when we bring them back to the United States, they're taxed at 35%. Ireland, on the other hand, has no repatriation tax. So as an Ireland-based company, we're going to be able to use all of our foreign earnings without having to worry about the government taking 35% of them. This is important to us because we can now put our foreign earnings to work more effectively. We can use them to pay dividends, issue share buybacks, invest in our operations, and commence real estate acquisitions. All things that right now we have to worry about that 35% disincentive before we do. Now, all this sounds great, but the tax tail should not wag the business dog. In other words, if we have all these tax savings, we have to be able to put them to work. So the acquisition from a business standpoint has to make sense. We have to have synergies between our company and the Ireland company. 4 synergies that we've outlined is we're going to increase our geographical footprint. Being an Ireland-based company, Tracker Technologies is part of the European Union, which means we'll be able to easily expand into the European countries and take advantage or grow our customer base there. Also, both companies are very innovative and have strong R&D departments, one being software and one being hardware. We feel that by marrying these 2 R&D departments, we're going to be able to enhance our suite of products. And finally, we're going to improve our access to our global distribution channels. We currently have distribution centers abroad. By having our headquarters over there, we're going to be able to more easily communicate with those distribution centers and hopefully build more distribution centers in the future. Most importantly, all of these business synergies are going to further our mission and make us a stronger company moving forward. All right, so we have tax savings and business synergies, but how are we going to be able to afford to buy Tracker Technologies? Well, luckily, both the United States and Europe are in historical all-time low interest rate environments. Meaning we can take out a loan at a low interest rate, and with our tax savings and our access to foreign earnings, as well as our increasing cash flow from operations coming from our business synergies, we should be able to pay off this loan early and realize an early return on investment. Some companies stop their analysis right there. The tax inversion makes sense on paper, we're going to save money, and we're going to have business synergies. But there's also a human aspect here. We have to worry about integrating the cultures and management of two completely different companies. This can be timely. However, we have noted 3 mitigating factors here. Actually, 1 mitigating factor and 2 opportunities. First, the United States and Ireland have similar business practices. We speak the same language, and we practice business actually very similarly to Ireland companies. Also, this integration is an opportunity for our current employees to continue to grow in their careers, being a part of a more globally minded company. And finally, we can use this opportunity to bring on highly trained employees from Tracker Technologies and integrate them into our mission, which is also going to make our company stronger. As I had mentioned, there's potential negative brand effect here. Our company has developed close relationships in Minnesota, and as you can imagine, when we announced that we're moving our headquarters to Ireland, there might be some stress there, some strain coming from the shareholders. There's also extended risk of a negative brand effect, as there's been negative public publicity around the United States around tax inversions. Now, these are hard to quantify, and we feel that looking at a global perspective, our brand is actually going to become stronger by becoming a more global company moving forward. Final risk here is that a tax inversion is a tax realization event for shareholders, meaning that when we invert, our shareholders have to pay capital gains tax on all the money they've made since the time they purchased their shares until the inversion takes place. Obviously, shareholders aren't going to be too happy about paying a capital gains tax that they weren't expecting to pay. In addition to this, companies are faced with the decision of whether or not to pay you as the executives tax burdens. You are shareholders in the company, and companies in the past board of directors have decided to pay their executives tax burden in order to keep them from making a personally biased decision based on their own personal finances. The mitigating factor here is that after inversion, we feel we're going to be a stronger company. We're going to have an increase in capital gains, which is going to lead to a higher stock price, and our shareholders are definitely going to be happy about that. So, from a business standpoint, we do recommend completing a tax inversion, acquiring an Ireland-based company, because it's going to further our company's missions. We're going to have tax savings, which we're going to be able to put to work in the business synergies. And while there are risks, we feel like we can mitigate those risks moving forward. Now that I presented the business analysis, I'd like to hand it out to Jess to go through the legal analysis. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake, for providing us with a business analysis and recommendation. I'd like to follow up by providing you with a legal analysis, ultimately recommending that we can and should invert to Ireland. Now let's start out by talking post-inversion structure. What do we look like post-inversion? Okay, no, not this type of inversion, although I am a yoga instructor. We are talking something much more exciting today, corporate tax inversions. Now, there are no major cases governing the topic of inversions, so let's start out by talking about the Internal Revenue Code, which is law. Now, the Internal Revenue Code provides a bright line test that we must pass in order to be subject to Irish tax law, reaping some of the benefits that Jake has mentioned for you. Now, this bright line test says that at least 20% ownership in the newly formed company must be from foreign investors. The flip side of this coin is that only up to 80% investors in the newly formed company can be continuing Ox Innovation shareholders. Now moving on to shareholder considerations. Now our board has a big task in front of it with regard to this inversion, In deciding whether or not to invert, our board has certain duties that it must exercise, including its fiduciary duties to our shareholders and our company. These fiduciary duties are similar in both Ireland and Minnesota, as both boards of Tracker Technologies and Ox Innovations must consider them. And these fiduciary duties require that our board act in the best interest of the company, that it act in good faith, and that it avoid conflicts of interest in making its decision on whether to invert. Now, shareholders here also have some power. Shareholder approval is also required, as well as board approval for the inversion transaction to go through. Additionally, shareholders can bring derivative suits if they feel that our board did not exercise good business judgment in deciding whether to invert. Now let's talk about the international implications at play here. Now Ireland is part of the European Union, as Jake mentioned for you before. Now this actually has a lot of benefits for our company because if we invert to Ireland, we're not only subject to Irish law, but also EU law. The EU has the power to enter into major trade agreements between its member states that affect all of the member states. So right now there is free trade among the 27 other member states and Ireland. And there's also international agreements that the EU is considering. One example of this is the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. This is something in the works right now being considered between the EU and the United States. It would open up free trade between the EU and the United States. This would increase demand for our products on both sides of the pond, and it would increase operational efficiencies for our company on both sides as well. Now, in terms of international law, there's also some hurdles that we have to overcome that we must consider. First, the inversion transaction is subject to approval by the Irish Takeover Panel. Additionally, the National Competition Authority can review the transaction, acting on behalf of the EU, as well as the Irish Competition Authority. Now, there's also some major uncertainty in both US and Irish law on the topic of inversions. Starting out with the US, you may have heard that in September of last year, the Treasury Department with Congress was discussing imposition of some new regulations that would curb the growing enthusiasm that we've seen for inversion transactions. Now, these regulations would make it harder for companies to invert, maybe blocking some inversion transactions altogether. Additionally, the Treasury Department has cited retroactive precedent, so they could impose these new regulations retroactively, meaning that even if we do invert, we could see some of the tax benefits that we were trying to reap go away in the future. So this is major consideration for us as we move forward. Now, in terms of uncertainty in the Irish law, I'd like to talk about the double Irish tax loophole closing. This is just one example. So the double Irish tax loophole was something available to companies who were Irish registered, but not necessarily located. And this loophole allowed a lower corporate tax rate for revenue derived from intellectual property and patent innovations, of which our company has many. Now, this double Irish tax loophole is closing, and that companies can not just be registered there, they also have to be located in Ireland. This means that it wouldn't be a big issue for us in terms of we will be located in Ireland, but it's just something to consider in terms of seeing governments imposing changes with regard to tax and inversion law. Now, any law students and lawyers in the room know that it is a daunting task complying with an entirely new set of laws. Here we're not only having to comply with Irish law if we invert, but EU law as well. Luckily, we can reduce the cost of complying with these new sets of laws by partnering up with some of our new employees as a result of the acquisition. Tracker Technologies has a legal department that we can utilize to reduce these costs of compliance, understanding the laws we're subject to, and complying with them. Now, to wrap it up, I'd ultimately like to recommend from a legal perspective that we can invert and we should invert. Although there is some uncertainty in Irish and US law, as I mentioned, there are many business synergies to be realized, as Jake mentioned before. Additionally, there are many benefits, including free trade, associated with becoming subject to EU law. Next, I'd like to pass it off to Seth, who will cover the ethical analysis for you and wrap up our presentation.
Thank you, Jessica. Now, Jake has given you an expert understanding of the potential business opportunities that we can leverage here, as well as some of the uncertainties that we're facing. And Jessica has shown you the uncertainty in the legal landscape that we'll have to navigate. What I would like to do for you is take you through our ethical analysis and give you a full view of the case that we've developed so that you have all of the information that you need in order to take a recommendation before our board. Now, when we went through the ethical analysis, we wanted to make sure that we left no stone unturned, that we covered all of the possible perspectives. And to do that, we looked at 4 different viewpoints, if you will. First, we analyzed the duties, the obligations that we have to our constituents within the company and outside. We'll also be discussing the interests that those groups have and how they play into this decision. We'll analyze the virtues, that is, the character that we need to evidence as we make action. And finally, we'll look at the rights that these groups have and how they might exert those on us to see their own desires realized. Let's begin with the duties that we have, the obligations that we have to the individuals at play here. First, to our home community, to the United States of America, we have a duty to serve this country. One might think of a familial obligation. A family that has a child, that child grows up, goes out into the world, starts making his way, earns a living. And over time, he or she might actually then come back and take some of the responsibility for caring for their parents. Much in the same way, we got our start here in the United States. You could consider this country our parent country, and we have a duty to care for the communities in which we're involved. We also have a duty to the global community. We have a duty to reach new users. You've all seen the products that we make. We're very proud of them. They further our mission of improving the lives of the users that we reach. We have a duty to bring that to as many people as possible. We also have a duty to promote the global economy, which can be served by moving overseas. However, Oxt Innovations, we also have duties here within our company. We have a duty to work for Oxt Innovations' benefit. Consider, again, much like Jessica talked, the fiduciary duty that we have, the duty of care and the duty of loyalty, that we're acting in Oxt Innovations' best interest and that we're playing for the team, Oxt Innovations, pre-inversion, and post-inversion, the team that's created by Oxt Innovations and Tracker Technologies. And finally, we have a duty to fulfill contract obligations. Our suppliers and our customers or retailers expect continuing steady business operations based on the contracts that we've entered into with them. And we have a duty to fulfill those contracts. And we need to make sure that we can do that if we invert. We also want to consider the interests that these groups have and how they might affect our decision. Here at home, the United States has an interest in job maintenance and economic growth. And that's likely to be called into question if we perform an inversion. But it's important to note that we're not simply picking up, packing our bags, and moving overseas. In fact, we hope that this inversion would actually allow us to grow our business both at home and abroad. And we need to make sure that we publicize that and make sure that everyone understands that if we perform an inversion. We also have to consider the interest that this country has in community involvement. Much as we have a duty to care for the communities in which we operate, their interests are best served if our employees are engaged and they can interact in that community. The global community also has interests at play. First, it's in their best interest that we reach new users. Again, our products are very impressive, we're very proud of them, they serve our mission, and we hope that they can improve the lives of those individuals that use them. And they have an interest in economic growth. The global community as a whole, if you consider, the United States is part of that community. And as we raise the boat for the global community, we're raising the boat for the United States, and that is where our highest interest is served. And finally, there are interests at play for Oxt Innovations itself. This company has an interest in sustainable growth. We're not talking about land grab, let's grow over 30% in one evening growth that happens one time. We're looking for deals that create long-lasting opportunity for Oxt Innovations. And we need to make sure that as we analyze this deal, it's something that does create long-term opportunity. It's not simply a jump in overall size. We also have shareholders that have interest at play. And their long-term interests should be handsomely served by the increase in share price. But you're going to see tension, as Jake talked about, with the short-term implication that they have and the tax burden that they're made to bear if we perform this inversion. And we'll need to be aware of that. And finally, it's in our best interest to fulfill our contract obligations. Much like our suppliers and customers are best served if we are fulfilling their contracts, we need to be able to expect continued steady business operations in order to look into the future. Let's now look at the rights that these organizations and these different groups have and how they might exert those on us. First, the United States of America. This country has a right to see dividends from our growth and our success here. What does that mean? Our success is partially built upon the rule of law and the infrastructure that we can leverage here in the United States, and that's how we got our start. I do admit that there are times where you'll see our roads aren't great and our political system doesn't necessarily work the way we would like it to, but we've benefited from the United States and have built our success here. And they do have a right to see some dividends from that. Further, the global community has a right here. They have a right to compete for our business, which they're doing by creating a positive business environment. After all, where would we be if we weren't competing with each other, pushing each other, making each other better? Think about the race to the moon, if you will. That's how we make each other better as a global community, by competing and by moving each other forward. Oxt Innovations also has rights. We have rights to leverage the success that we've already had. We've all worked very hard to build this company, and we've seen success overseas and at home. Who better to use those funds that we have overseas, and how better to use them than to further our mission? Our board is the most skilled in order to do that, and our employees are very energetic and will be the best individuals capable of improving that and furthering that mission. Further, our shareholders have rights, and they can exert those rights by, 1, voting as they can every year in our shareholder meetings, or 2, simply selling or purchasing shares as they see fit to do so. We also want to consider the virtues that we need to evidence as we take action, not only here but in our everyday actions. It's often been said that talent is what gets you to the top, but character is what's going to keep you there. And that's really what we're talking about here. We're talking about the character that you and I evidence, the virtues that we show in our actions day in and day out. First, we must exhibit courage in action. What does that mean? This is a really big deal. There's lots of zeros, many different moving pieces. Jake talked about the cultural integration that we're going to have to worry about. And if we do go through with this, there are going to be lawyers running everywhere, much like Jessica spoke. It's very easy to get caught up in that, step back, not want to do anything, lest you make a mistake. But if you don't take action, if you don't consider the options that are available to you and make a decisive decision, you're likely to miss an opportunity that comes across or end up in an area that you don't want to be. So just remember that you're looking at all of the opportunities available to you and taking decisive action. Further, we have to evidence loyalty both at home and abroad. And again, our loyalty at home may be called into question, but our highest loyalty is to the global community. The United States is part of the global community, and as long as we manage our loyalty here and abroad, as we are already an international company, we can move forward effectively. And finally, prudence. A check, if you will, to the courage and action I was just speaking about. We don't want to go out and just grab the first thing that comes along. We want to make sure that we're stepping back and looking at all of the options available to us and making a prudent, wise decision that is in the best interest of our stakeholders. Based on our ethical analysis, looking at all of the different perspectives, we do believe that it is in Oxt Innovations' best interest to invert because it allows us to serve our duty to the global community. And it allows us to cater to the best interest of the most stakeholders. And finally, it is a virtuous choice if we act in a manner that is consistent with Oxt Innovations' mission and values. We've covered a lot of ground today, a lot of very interesting stuff. Some of it is actually relatively complex. What I want to do for you now is take you through an integrated recommendation, hit the high points, so that when you go before our board, these issues are front of mind. We do believe that there are tremendous business synergies to be leveraged in an inversion, but we recognize that there are some uncertainties in the legal framework that we'll need to manage not only as we approach an inversion, but continuing after we complete the inversion and are a single company. Further, we believe that this will allow us to enhance our duty to society, and we must make sure that we act in a courageous manner as we move forward through this inversion. Ladies and gentlemen, we do believe that it is in the best interest of Oxt Innovation to invert in order that we can capitalize on the business strengths that we've identified. Clearly recognizing that there is business and legal uncertainty that we will need to manage. so that we can act in a course that is consistent, an ethical course that is consistent with Ox Innovation's mission and values. We really want to thank you for the opportunity to investigate this issue. We appreciate the trust that you've placed in us to bring this before you. We're very excited about the topic, and we look forward to discussing it with you in any depth that you would like. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Did you have?
No, shoot, question and answer.
Okay, good.
No, they're just going to come help me.
Yeah, great.
As I see it, I'm worried that you have conflated two totally separate issues. One is, does it make sense for us to buy this Irish company from a business point of view? Standalone decision. The other is the tax issue. And I'm sort of lost a little bit in between those two decisions on what the ethical dilemma is. Why don't we just get a post office box in the Bahamas and forget about this buying an Irish company in a legal system we don't understand and reincorporate in the Bahamas? Pay the lowest tax rate possible. Business continues in the States, we satisfy our contractual obligations to our customers, and we don't have as big a tax bill.
Yeah, a few point action, answer. One, we would want to move to Ireland, one, because the company itself that we've recognized there has the business synergies. That's kind of why we brought them up. So I think by acquiring the Irish company, we're actually seeing more advantages than just having a post office box in the Cayman Islands. It was a strategic business decision based both on the merger but also on the tax inversion. Would you like to add to that?
Yeah, so another point there is that the benefits that we would see being subject to EU law, we would not see by just merging. We would have to invert, not only saving on the tax side of things, which we could then, as we stated, use to further our mission, but also being subject to EU law allows that free trade within the EU and potentially between the EU and the United States that we would like to realize as well, which is why we'd rather invert than just simply merge.
So if I could actually go follow up on what Barney's saying and go a step further. What started this? We needed something that we started to look for a company to merge with, and this company happened to be in Ireland, and then we saw there was a tax advantage, or were we looking for a tax advantage for some business need?
That's an excellent question. One thing that I'd like to state for you is that over the past decade, if you will, the business climate in the global community has been changing. Our tax rate here in the United States has stayed relatively steady while tax rates over the globe have decreased slowly. And when you're looking at how you want to expand your business, we're also going to consider whether or not that business will merge well with our culture and how that business fits into our overall strategy, looking again for long-term growth. And as we looked to how we could leverage the success that we've had overseas, that money that we can't necessarily leverage to its full extent now, we've started to look to Ireland as it has a lower tax rate, and there's a company there that's Tracker Technologies that does have some synergies with our corporation. And we believe that by performing this inversion with those synergies, we'll be able to further the mission of our company.
I have a question. I'm not real clear on what is the financial impact. So what do we stand to lose and what do we stand to gain? I know there was a slide that talked a little bit around some percentages, but I would like a little bit more clarity around that.
On the tax side or on the business side?
On the business side. So the tax inversion presents an opportunity for us to make some gains long term. It's going to be there may be some upfront investment, but I just wasn't clear on what the long term gain is.
So between the two companies, the long-term gain is taking advantage of those business synergies that we have. So our company is currently a hardware company. So by acquiring a software company, rather than outsourcing that software need for our products, we bring them in-house, which we're going to be able to realize cost savings there. And also, we think that the research and development is going to be more further advanced, allowing us to be more innovative and stay ahead of our competitors by acquiring a software-based company. Does that answer your question, or was that?
What
Yeah.
are the financial implications of that? Right?
Yeah, I guess I was just trying to, like, the tax burden piece is clear, but what is the return on investment, I guess? So what does the business stand to gain over the long term? How does our profit margin move?
Hopefully it grows. Obviously, we didn't get as deep into the numbers themselves because it is they're made of companies, if I may. But in the past, you can see profit margins growing both from the tax savings and then from the synergies between the two companies. I can't bring in numbers to answer the question because we didn't have any to go on to, so I couldn't really do a full financial analysis.
So you're saying 2 points. One is through tax savings, but 2 is through the potential growth from these two, from the hardware and the software merging,
Right.
and opening up new markets.
As well as the tax savings that you can see here, the tax burdens being different for the two different scenarios. We can use that to invest in R&D, expand our portfolio of products, around the EU, and increase demand on both sides.
Help me understand the ethical issues here. You talked about duties. Now, I understand contractual obligations. We're going to fulfill those no matter where we're headquartered. But what's the source of these duties that you talk about? I don't see any of it in the Constitution. I don't know that those duties are in any laws, statutes in the United States. Where do these duties come from?
Well, if I may, when I think about duties to other stakeholders, individuals, it's guttural beholden, if you will, that we've built success, we've shared in the journey over the course of time, and because of that, when the way we've leveraged off of this country and the global community, we have obligations to fulfill to those communities.
To expand on that just a little bit, they would be kind of coming from a moral obligation perspective. So something that we feel internally as a company that is searching to improve the lives of people, we feel that we owe a duty to those that have helped us grow in achieving that mission.
But we're going to do that anyway. We're not cutting jobs in the States just because we move our headquarters. We're still going to employ people in Minnesota. What's the problem?
Yes, why aren't you cutting jobs? Part of that is because of the fact that we feel we have a duty here to stay within the United States and grow our business here as well as abroad.
So other than that, you're suggesting we do cut jobs?
Most inversions, data says that most inversions actually don't cut jobs at home, so we don't see it as a necessity, but we have kind of an additional layer on that where we want to make sure from a duty-based perspective that we keep the jobs here. Even if it said that it made sense from a financial perspective, we feel as a duty to our home country, we'd like to keep the jobs here, focus on expansion rather than cutting back in any
So this
areas.
is a Lake Wobegon then. The women are all strong, the men are good looking, and the children are loved.
Well, we are from Minnesota, so we say that.
Garrison Keeler will be retiring shortly, and I'm sure we'll have a new saying.
Say it ain't so.
Yeah,
So it just like feels like we ought to have some higher obligation?
No, we do have a higher obligation. The feeling is there for a reason. That's driving us forward. But based on our social interactions and again the moral underlay that we have as individuals that we've built in a society where that we live in, we have a duty to those individuals based on those expectations.
Whether or not those expectations have a negative impact on our bottom line and our return on value to stakeholders.
It's not always about making sure that we take the most monetarily effective route.
That might be true, but I think we need to consider that in our overall business model. I'm not against our company doing right and good, but we are in business to make money, and we are in business for return on investment of our stakeholders, and company people invest in us with that in mind. So have we, this is coming back to what Ernie was saying, how do I keep calling Ernie? Barney was saying, is did we just come up with these values in our analysis and we think this is a good thing to do and you thought it was a good thing to put in the presentation to us, or do we have corporate values that are suggesting that as a company we've promised our stakeholders this is what we'll do?
I couldn't have said it better myself. You've identified that there is going to be conflict from an ethical standpoint, and we're looking to fulfill the greatest duty to the most interests, if you will, and serve the most individuals or the largest group. And as we go forward, it's going to take me a little while to get back there, but if you remember the mission and vision of this company, we do believe that this inversion does fit well with our mission and values, and those were set forth from the beginning of the company.
From the shareholder duties perspective, as you mentioned before, you're concerned about the bottom line. We did talk about kind of the tension between the short term and the long term with that, where in the short term, our shareholders might not be too pleased, but in the long term, when companies invert, they see increased earnings per share, increased retained earnings, which could result in dividends that would benefit the shareholders, and increased cash flows that allow us to reinvest in our company. So overall, I understand your concern in the short term, but in the long run, for those investors who are investing in our long-term growth, they will see benefits as a result of that.
Look, everybody knows those Europeans are just socialists, right? Why would we want to buy into that whole system?
I think each of us has a favorite reason for that. One of my favorites that Jessica spoke about was the fact that by entering into the European Union, we have access to 27 other countries, 27 other groups to whom we can sell, that we can reach, that we can leverage as part of an employment
we can do
group.
that anyway.
Not as easily. If we're a member of the...
saying you have to buy the cow to get the milk.
I'm sorry?
You don't have to buy the cow to get the milk.
Mm-hmm.
But we would not be subject to the free trade agreements among those member states without inverting. And so by inverting, we receive the free trade, reduced tariffs, can increase demand for our products across 27 countries.
But shouldn't I be worried about Greece going bankrupt and Spain following close on their heels and then Portugal? The place is collapsing.
I don't know that the European Union is necessarily collapsing. Yes, you'll paint a negative picture in terms of some of those statutes or events, but we have our own challenges here at home. Remember, I stated that our political system doesn't always work the way it should. Those are simply issues that we need to manage from a business perspective and understand that as we become a global community, a global company, we're going to encounter more and more differing operational, more differing governmental statutes.
Okay, good. Thanks, guys. Take a deep breath.
Nice question.
Yeah.
You can ask a question.
No, I was commending you on your question.
Oh.
I really appreciate it.
No point in flattering the judges. I speak from the perspective of somebody who works for a European company, headquartered in England, and the European Union is a tough place to do business. There are all sorts of issues that we don't even come close to. I'll give you one example: data protection. There are data privacy issues there that I'm an American lawyer, and I don't understand them, and I've been working with them for 10 years. Things that we would not think of as personal data. Anything that identifies me as a living human being is personal data and protected under European law. And then there are subcategories within that which are highly protected. So you got to be careful moving into that legal regime. But first of all, I have to ask you guys a question. Did you use Prezi? What's your software presentation?
This is just a supercharged PowerPoint.
Oh, nice, nice. Because it looked like somebody used Prezi. Did you guys?
No.
No? Prezi is very cool.
It's a fun software.
Yeah. Nice job. You're very poised. We're professionals at asking hard questions, and you didn't get flustered. Good job.
I couldn't wait to jump to the feedback because I thought you did an exceptionally good job. I coach people on how to develop presentations and stand-up skills. I thought you all did an excellent job. You played well with each other. You actually operated as a group in terms of your transitions, handing off to each other, supporting each other, and questions going back. and pulling in the previous person's comments. So I was able to track well with you throughout the entire presentation. And I would sign. I'm ready to sign. I mean, your concerns are valid. There are definitely issues, dealing abroad. But what I liked about your presentation is that you didn't, for lack of a better term, you didn't blow smoke. You weren't trying to razzle and dazzle us with all of the great, wonderful, colorful possibilities. You kept the challenges in front of us, and you spoke to those challenges throughout the presentation. And I love the fact that, this is my job, so this is what I do. I love the fact that you pulled in the character piece, and you talked about the virtues, because one of our core values is winning with integrity. We just changed it this year from winning to winning with integrity, because we do want to win as a company, but not at all costs. And so I really like how you pulled all that together.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have to say I was most struck by the PowerPoint. Very clean, very crisp. There was no question as to where I was in it, what was happening. You took each section. I knew when I was in the business case, the legal case, I liked that I could follow on the bottom. I thought that was very clever. I've never seen that used, but I've certainly put it now into my repertoire of things that could be potentially used in my own profession. So that was excellent. The other things, there were a couple things that I thought, have you guys worked before? Because you introduced yourselves, you made it clear exactly what you were doing. The transitions were very smooth. I have to say, from a professionalism standpoint, excellent. Excellent.
And you had me at hello. I said to her, this was the first group that actually came in, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but came in and introduced themselves to the judges, and actually came in and shook their hands and made eye contact. And one of my favorite mentors in the whole wide world said, never enter a room when you're presenting without going around and introducing yourselves to people and making that eye contact, because it helps you establish rapport. So.
And Jessica,
you had me at hello.
As a humble yoga practitioner myself, I really like the inversion slide.
Thank you.
That's our favorite part.
It's okay to use humor, and that was appropriate.
Thank you.
And an appropriate use of graphics.
Yeah.
I have to say your graphics were they weren't overdone, very clean, very crisp. They tied to the slide, added a little, variety to something that's pretty dry topic, really.
Thank you.
How do you guys feel about it?
Pretty good.
Felt pretty good.
Yeah.
The question and answer was tough.
Yeah,
but,
definitely.
Yeah, but you're rattled.
That would be a piece of constructive feedback that I would give, is that you gave this almost perfect presentation, and your presence was perfect, and I was like, oh God, don't crumble under the questions. I just felt for a second that you might had a little, been a little uncomfortable. You held your own though. I mean, you pulled it together, which I was glad to see. But I was a little nervous.
Yeah, actually, the one flaw I would say is when you said to me that, well, this is a made-up company. And I get that. That's why we're all here. But I was in character, and I'm a board member, and I'm asking you, or whatever I was, and I'm asking you financial questions, because I'm telling you, it can be as feel-good as you want it to be, but at the end of the day, they want to know about the business case, because they're not going to prove it otherwise. So I thought, okay, you broke a little there, but that, in the scheme of things, not bad.
Thank you.
Thank you.